Terrence Malick is a name that raises many questions.
Who is this man?
Apart from a cameo appearance in his first feature film Badlands and a handful of interviews, Malick is notoriously a private individual.
And Terry's in it, answering the door. That was all quite funny because the actor just didn't turn up that day.
2 decades separate Days of Heaven and The Thin Red Line, and exactly what Malick was up to during this period remains unclear.
When he disappeared for 15 to 20 years, I'd get reports from people either driving cars or, that had brushed against him. We were in France. My wife had a film at Cannes, and we went out and we were at this swimming pool party and talking to this guy who was having the party, and we started talking about Terrence Malick, and he says, "Oh, he cuts my hair in Paris." And he lives in a garage in Paris and cuts my hair. And it's just the image of this director who I revered, like cutting somebody's hair in Paris. But then later I knew he had a French girlfriend, so it all seemed kind of feasible.
Regardless of these lost years, over the course of his career, Malick has developed one of the most distinct voices in the history of cinema.
Terrence Malick, more than almost any other filmmaker I could name, his work is immediately recognizable. His films are all very, very connected with each other, and they're very recognizably his work, but it's very tough to put your finger on why that is or what you're seeing in that. The technique is not immediately obvious.
I think whenever you're trying to understand a director with such a dominant authorial voice, it's always best to first explore the artist rather than the films. Yes, Malick is notoriously private, and first-hand details about him are scarce. What isn't scarce, however, are the stories of those who have worked alongside him, and by assembling these fragments, Malick becomes less elusive than he initially appears.
Terry works from a sense of space, whether it's kind of mental space or spiritual space or physical space.
Space is an essential aspect of Malick's films, and the person largely responsible for creating this space is Malick's longtime collaborator, Jack Fisk.
Terry and I don't talk that much about character. I have trouble building if I don't really understand the character. Like why would they have the table there and not over there? Why would they have a red wall and not a white wall?
Jack Fisk is very much a legend in his own right, and he has worked as a production designer for many of the great filmmakers, including Martin Scorsese, Paul Thomas Anderson, and lifelong friend David Lynch, whom Fisk first met during childhood.
David and I met in 9th grade at Hammond High School in Alexandria, Virginia. It had been about 1960 or 61.
Jack Fisk actually appears on camera in a few of David's very early works, as well as appearing in David's debut feature film Eraserhead, a film he helped fund alongside his wife, Sissy Spacek. Despite their lifelong friendship, as production designer, Jack only worked on The Straight Story and Mulholland Drive with David, which pales in comparison to Jack's work with Malick. Over 40 years, the two would work on a total of 8 films, beginning with Badlands and ending with Malick's final film in his experimental trilogy, Song to Song. In terms of how Jack Fisk tackles production design, he first starts from character.
Most of my inspiration comes from character, so that if I'm doing a set for a character, I try to get myself into the minds of the character and figure out where he would live, why he would live there, and what it would look like.
Sissy Spacek, whom he met on Badlands, likens his way of working to that of Stanislavski, whose system is the basis for method acting.
I probably learned more about acting from Jack than I learned in any class, because he'd read Stanislavski, and I've always joked with him, it was the way he works, and still, it's the Stanislavski production design. He works through the characters.
Jack Fisk's work helps the actors find their characters, and in turn, the actors collaborate with Jack so that he can find different elements to contribute to the set.
I think an important contribution that art direction makes to films is helping the actors, creating an environment. Working with Daniel Day-Lewis, I realized, that how much it helped him, to kind of get lost, to get lost in the moment. And I learned, being married to an actress, I really appreciate actors. And the same way I struggle to find reasons for doing things, they're struggling to build a character. So anything I can do to help them, and anything they can tell me, helps put the sets together, that I feel more comfortable knowing things are right for character than just being there.
Jack Fisk's approach to character and production design is also influenced by American painter Edward Hopper. In a 2016 interview with Criterion, Fisk said, "I think of Edward Hopper as the best production designer or art director. With just a few objects he tells a great story, and I love how minimal his work is and how important each object becomes. So I look at his work a lot. Just like Hopper, Jack is minimal in his approach, only including items essential to the character. Sometimes Jack will even fill drawers with objects tied to the character. It's something the audience doesn't see on screen, but again it's very helpful for the actor and their performance."
I learned about Holly from Jack's sets. Usually when you're on a set, you open the drawers and there's nothing there. And that was not the case with him. He had books in her bookshelves that were things that would have meaning for her. The way he works is he tries to see out of their eyes, the character's eyes.
Beyond character, Jack designs his sets around how Malick likes to work.
Terry is an interesting director. He's one of the few directors that doesn't look at drawings. He just says, whatever you build, I'll just shoot. I'll come in like a documentary crew. I'll shoot it. I mean, he doesn't really understand just shooting a bit of a set or a wall or one direction. And he changes his direction as the sun changes, always keeping everything backlit.
There is something very specific that Malick seeks to capture whenever he's shooting one of his films. In some of his works, such as the experimental trilogy, Malick didn't use scripts at all, and for some of his other projects, such as The Tree of Life or The New World, scripts were used as a springboard into improvisation, as opposed to a more rigid and traditional scene-by-scene approach.
Well, I find it very hard to, execute anything that is too preconceived or storyboards. I've never been able to work from a storyboard because it's hard. You always have a little bit of feeling you're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
From a performance perspective, Terry does not rehearse scenes with actors. It's a similar idea of Malick once again trying to capture something completely authentic and real.
On my very first day, I was actually, doing a scene. My understanding was that they were shooting the other actor doing a close-up and I wasn't needed for it. And so I just went. I stayed on the set, but I was just sitting on the side and I was smoking the pipe that John Rolfe smokes. And then I suddenly realized that the camera was pointed at me.
Malick can shoot hundreds of hours of footage for a single feature film, so Jack Fisk creates and finds suitable locations with this approach in mind.
It was very funny at times because Terry liked Jack Fisk to create the houses and the locations so that he could shoot 360 degrees. So the crew had to be ready for that as well, because unlike most movies where they absolutely know the camera's locked between these two positions, that's it. With Terry, you never knew. It could be there, and then suddenly he's spinning around and looking there. So you can't have the gaffers and everybody, or the craft service set up right there. And I couldn't stop laughing on my very first day when he did do this thing to me, where he just suddenly turned the camera on me and said, "Christian, do whatever you feel like doing. Walk up and down, do whatever you want to do." And so I did start doing that. And I realized that, okay, there was a bunch of crew over there. So if I walked over there, what were they going to do? So my bloody-minded nature, I was like, I'm going to go take a look, see what they do. So I did. I started walking over there, and they were running. They were diving behind bushes to get out of the way, because they just knew this was part of the deal of working with Terry. They could spin around any second.
The way Terry likes to shoot and the spontaneity with which he likes to aim and frame the camera sort of excludes any opportunity to artificially light a scene.
I'm yet to encounter a director who uses light, more specifically natural light, as well as Terrence Malick. He has completely mastered the art of light, and every single frame of his films feels like a painting.
I realized much later his father was a photographer, an amateur photographer, but Terry had learned a lot about light, or knew a lot about light. Terry knows about everything, but he knew a lot about light.
Malick's knowledge of light is so great, in fact, that even longtime collaborator and one of the greatest cinematographers to ever do it, Emmanuel Lubetsky, also known by his nickname Chivo, offered praise.
Chivo said, he learned so much from Terry about light. I learned so much from Terry about everything. He's a brilliant filmmaker.
When working with natural light, the layout and design of sets is incredibly important, and this is where Jack Fisk comes in once again. On the set of The New World, Jack would modify sets wherever needed for Chivo, and in the Tree of Life, the crew hired a 5-block area that they could freely roam and shoot anywhere within.
The last 3 films that I've worked with him, we've used no artificial light, but we use window light. You know, we go closer to the window or outside, and it's beautiful. And Emmanuel Lubezki has embraced that and I think mastered shooting film with natural light.
Jack, Chivo and Malick all bring out the best of each other, and it is this collaboration between them that is at the heart of so many of Malick's films.
I give them something to shoot and then they finish it with light. And when you're working with great cinematographers, they make our work look better. Sometimes our work is choosing locations, not building anything, but we work in concert to create an image, you know, ideally. As I've gotten older, my appreciation for cinematographers has grown immensely, and I realize how much I depend on them to finish what I start. Harry's a philosopher, so I think built into his films is, you know, it's all these philosophical questions. And I'm not a philosopher, but it makes me think about life.
Before Malick became a filmmaker, he studied philosophy at Oxford University and later taught philosophy at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. One of the philosophers Malick based his thesis on was Martin Heidegger, and he would later go on to translate some of Heidegger's work into English. Exploring the philosophy of Malick would easily be an entire video in itself, so what I wish to touch on here is not the content of Malick's philosophy, but rather how he conveys it. The main way being his use of voiceover.
I found with Terry that a lot of stuff he wants to say as a philosopher, it doesn't matter which character says it.
Scarcity creates value. Malick's films do not include much dialogue, which in turn adds weight to every line that is delivered. Malick uses voiceover in a very poetic and meditative way, preferring to pose questions to the viewer rather than give any explicit answers.
What's this war in the heart of nature?
There's a specific section that takes place during the third act of The Thin Red Line at the camp that I believe really exemplifies Malick and his use of voiceover. It's around 20 minutes in length, and it touches on so many different themes, such as the dehumanising nature of war, love, idealisation, nature, division, memory, etc. Malick blends the perspectives of many different soldiers of the company, such as Private Bell, whose relationship to his wife and the perfect nature of it is his reason for being, his reason for fighting, and the reason he clings on to his humanity in the face of such atrocities.
I want to stay changeless for you.
We come to learn that in reality, their relationship is now quite different. Belle struggles to process her letter, and her voiceover is delivered with large pauses before stopping completely. This section is very quickly contrasted with Wick coming into contact with the indigenous people, and their more simple and harmonious nature. It's a glimpse of what could be, a world that does not know war and division, a community bound by love and a shared understanding.
We were a family.
Again, voiceover is used so softly and elegantly, really highlighting the dichotomy of the situation. It's quintessential Malick, and an incredible display of filmmaking. I would also like to highlight Malick's use of music throughout his films. This entire section is underpinned by the fantastic work of Hans Zimmer, which is pivotal in guiding us emotionally through the perspectives of the characters. Malick's voiceover would be nowhere near as effective without the support of music, and it is this layering of sound that makes his words so poignant. One of the more notable things about Malick's use of music is his fascination with classical pieces and composers. Malick uses different compositions from the likes of Mahler, Bach, Mozart and many others, and based on his selections, it is clear that he is well versed in music. One of my favourite uses of classical music in Malick's films is his use of Wagner's Das Rheingold in The New World. Das Rheingold plays at both the opening and closing of The New World, and putting aside the sheer power of the piece, the story of Das Rheingold adds narrative information to The New World. The story begins with 3 Rhine maidens, or 3 women in water who are guarding the Rheingold, which can be made into a magic ring that gives power to rule the world. It's easy to see the parallels to The New World, where you have a pure world that's invaded, and Malick's beautiful imagery at the start of the film really recontextualises Wagner's music. Another use of music I love in Malick's films is in Knight of Cups. The piece Fantasia on a Theme by Thomas Tallis is associated with the Christian allegory The Pilgrim's Progress. Knight of Cups directly quotes this text, and it loosely inspires the journey which Christian Bale's character makes during the film. You may not realise these narrative connections Terry makes with his music. I know I certainly didn't prior to research, but you get the sense of the pure harmony he manages to achieve when merging sound and image. Malick's very own symphony of sound.
The problem with Terry, which I soon found out, is that he needs a writer desperately, because he insists on doing everything, as we all know, and he insists on writing and overwriting until it sounds terribly pretentious. And you have to work terribly hard to make it sound real. And then he edits his films in such a way that he cuts everybody out of them. You know, the story of Adrian Brody.
Malick's unique approach to filmmaking has created disagreements and controversies over the years, most notably with Adrian Brody, whose part in the final cut of The Thin Red Line ended up vastly different from the lead role he was initially announced for.
I had several years to come to terms with Thin Red Line, and I had been acting for 17 years. So that was probably the greatest loss creatively that I've had, and hopefully will remain that.
Terry's insatiable desire for discovery during the creative process inevitably results in the changing of his stories, characters, and overall ideas. And whilst you definitely lose something during this process, look at what is gained as a result. I personally loathe the word pretentious, particularly in the context of an artist like Malick, who has easily proven his abilities as a writer, artist, and philosopher.
And all the important people had resigned and said, Terry, you're out of your mind. And that's the story of the New World. It was the most disappointing experience I've ever had with a man. It wasn't that he threw out my score. He loved my score. He didn't have a clue what to do with it. He didn't have a clue how to use music. So what he started to do was, as I said, take classical pieces, but not even pieces that were transparent and lovely. He was taking Wagner, like a thick, thick blanket or rug, and putting it on his movie. And I swear to God, on the dubbing stage, everybody thought he was joking when he would bring up these musical solutions and take out the score and put in the Wagner, or take out the score there and put in the Mozart.
It's easy for me to see why an actor like Christopher Plummer or a composer like James Horner didn't work well with a director like Malick. These were individuals with established ways of working who held strong opinions on how things should look and how things should be done. Both of these individuals lacked the necessary humility to understand that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Whenever I would talk to him, I'd say, well, in your film, when you did this, and he goes, no, it's our film. And he was like that with everyone. I mean, he was probably one of the few geniuses that I know, but he made you feel smarter than you are, just because he would treat you like you were as smart as he was. But if you're a little bit smart, you know that's not true.
Films are not about talk. It's about images and feelings and moments. It's not even about story in the end. You don't remember stories as much as you remember a moment in a movie that somehow cuts through everything else as like a dream image.
Malick's films are not for everyone, but it's hard to deny the unforgettable nature of what he's created. The world needs more artists like Malick, artists who are bold and singular, and who continually push their respective mediums beyond what is thought to be possible. Innovation is messy, and there will be times where you fall short, as Malick has at times, but this is all a part of what it means to be human. Whether he's shooting nature or an actor, Malick captures the beauty of a moment that can never be replicated, and fragments of an existence that can never truly be understood.
Terry Malick was looking for those moments of when you trip up, you know, the human moments that happen in the day.
He almost wanted mistakes, or at least mistakes.
Yes, the perfection of mistakes.